Hey, welcome to Imagine BL Story. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really encourages my work and helps me bring you more stories. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy today's story. I smelled them before I saw them. That's the thing about being an Omega that nobody tells you in those sanitized biology classes. Your nose becomes a traitor, cataloging every scent in a room, every pheromone signature, every intimate moment you were never supposed to witness. And right then, standing in the doorway of what was supposed to be my home for the next 3 months, I could smell everything. My fiancé Henry's alpine and cedar scent mixed with my stepsister Sofia's vanilla and amber. The combination made my stomach turn, not because it was unpleasant, but because of what it meant. They were on the couch in the living room. Sofia was wearing one of Henry's shirts. Her legs were draped across his lap, and his hand rested on her thigh with the kind of casual possessiveness that made something crack inside my chest. They didn't hear me come in. The door had closed so softly behind me, and they were too wrapped up in each other to notice the Omega they both wished would just disappear. "I can't keep doing this," Henry was saying, his voice low and rough in a way I'd never heard directed at me. 3 more months of pretending, of living with him, of playing the dutiful husband to a contract I never wanted. His fingers traced patterns on Sofia's skin, and I watched her smile, that perfect smile that had charmed everyone in both our families since the day her mother married my father. "Just a little longer," Sofia murmured, tilting her head to press a kiss to his jaw. "Once the merger is finalized, once the contracts are signed, we can figure out a way to break it. Your family gets what they want, my stepfather gets what he wants, and we get each other." She pulled back to look at him, and even from where I stood, frozen in the doorway. "Besides, it's not like Riley's going to fight for a marriage to someone who can barely stand to be in the same room with him." That's when Henry laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh exactly, but it was worse somehow. It was dismissive, like I was so far beneath his consideration that cruelty would have required too much effort. "No," he agreed. "He won't. He's too busy hiding behind his suppressants and pretending he's anything other than what his biology made him." He turned to look at Sofia then, and his whole expression softened in a way that made my chest feel like it was caving in. "This is what real attraction looks like. Not some outdated contract with an Omega I can barely stand to be in the same room with. I should have left. I should have backed out the door, gone anywhere else, saved myself from hearing whatever else they were going to say. But my feet wouldn't move. I just stood there like an idiot, watching my betrothed hold my sister, listening to him put into words what I'd known for 23 years. I was the obligation. Sofia was the choice. And there was nothing I could do about any of it because our families had signed contracts before I was old enough to have a say, before I knew that the person I was promised to would hate me for something I couldn't control. Sofia saw me first. Her eyes met mine over Henry's shoulder, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Not guilt, not embarrassment, something closer to triumph. Then she smiled, slow and satisfied, and pressed closer to Henry like she was marking her territory. "Henry," she said softly, and he turned to follow her gaze. Our eyes met across the living room. His were cold, that particular shade of gray that reminded me of winter storms, and right then they held absolutely no warmth. No apology, no shame in being caught, just irritation like I was an interruption to something important. "You're back early," he said flatly, and it was the tone you'd use with a roommate you barely tolerated, not the person you were supposed to marry in 3 months. "I live here," I managed to say, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. That was something, at least. 23 years of practice at hiding how much things hurt had given me that much. "Or did you forget that part of the trial period your father insisted on?" Sofia laughed, light and musical, the sound she used at charity galas and family dinners. "Oh, Riley, don't be dramatic. We were just talking." But she didn't move from Henry's lap, and her hand was still resting on his chest, right over his heart. "Right? Talking." I turned away before either of them could see my hands shaking. "I'll just go to my room then. Pretend I was never here." It was what I was good at, after all. Being invisible. Being the Omega who knew his place. being the disappointment my father tried to hide, and the burden my stepmother tolerated because she had no choice. I made it to my bedroom and closed the door before the first tear fell. The lock clicked into place, and I pressed my back against the wood, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor. My suppressants were wearing off early. I could feel it in the way my emotions were too close to the surface, in the way my hands trembled, in the way every scent in the apartment felt too sharp. I'd have to take another dose soon, but right then I just let myself feel it. The humiliation, the anger, the bone-deep loneliness of knowing I was tied to someone who looked at me like I was a problem to be solved. Just then, I noticed an unmarked and sealed envelope. My name was written on the front in handwriting I didn't recognize, block letters that gave nothing away. I picked it up with shaking hands and tore it open. Inside was a single photograph with a very clear image of my Sofia, the woman currently wrapped around my betrothed in our living room. She was sitting across from a man I recognized all too well. Patrick Ling, CEO of Titan Tech, the company that had been trying to acquire Cooper Industries for the last 5 years. The company that my marriage to Henry was supposed to protect against. They were in a cafe, heads bent close together, and on the table between them was a tablet displaying what looked like technical specifications. Sofia's hand was reaching across to point at something on the screen, and the smile on her face was nothing like the one she showed our families. I turned the photo over. On the back, written in the same block letters, were 4 words that made my blood run cold. "She's using you both." I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk with the photograph in front of me and my laptop open, staring at lines of code that refused to make sense. This wasn't the first time I'd questioned what Sofia was doing. For the last 6 months, I'd been quietly collecting breadcrumbs, little inconsistencies in our company's security logs, access points that shouldn't have been triggered, files that had been copied when they shouldn't have been touched. I told myself I was being paranoid, that growing up as the invisible son had made me see threats where there were none. But the photograph confirmed what I'd been afraid to admit. Someone else had noticed, too. My mother died when I was 4. I don't remember much about her except the scent of jasmine and the way she used to hum while working at her computer. She was an Omega 2, brilliant and kind, and according to my father, she's the reason Hawkins technology even exists. But he remarried 2 years later to a beta woman named Catherine, who came with a daughter 10 months older than me, Sofia. From the moment they moved in, she became the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, while I became the quiet one in the corner, useful only because of a contract signed before I could walk. The betrothal was arranged when both our families needed it. Cooper Industries had the innovation, Hawkins Technology had the manufacturing infrastructure, and an alliance secured both. I was promised to Henry Cooper before either of us had presented, back when it was just a business arrangement between families. Then I presented as Omega at 13, and suddenly the contract became something else entirely. A burden, an embarrassment. My father never said it out loud, but I saw it in the way he looked at me after that, like I'd failed him by being what my biology made me. Henry is 28 and everything I wasn't. Confident, respected, brilliant in a way that demanded attention. He'd built Cooper Industries' AI division from nothing, turned it into the most valuable part of their company, and he'd done it all while maintaining a policy that was barely legal and heavily criticized. No Omega executives. He claimed it was about merit, about not giving preferential treatment, but everyone knew the truth. Henry Cooper hated Omegas. He'd lost his mother during childbirth, an Omega who'd struggled with complications, and somehow he'd twisted that grief into prejudice. His father had partnered with another Omega years later, someone Henry blamed for nearly destroying their company through manipulation and poor decisions. I'd heard the stories at family dinners, seen the way Henry's jaw clenched whenever Omegas were mentioned, noticed the nervous habit he had of touching the bracelet on his wrist, the only thing he had left of his mother. And now I was supposed to marry him, live with him, build a life with someone who looked at me and saw only biology he despised. Sofia knew exactly what she was doing when she went after him. She'd always resented that I got the marriage contract despite being younger, despite being Omega, despite being everything our blended family wished I wasn't. She was charming and ambitious, perfect for corporate events and client dinners, and she'd positioned herself in Hawkins Technology's marketing department where she somehow had access to technical specifications that should have been locked behind 6 levels of security clearance. I'd noticed that too, added it to my growing list of things that didn't make sense. I pulled up the files I'd been compiling, encrypted and hidden in a partition my father's IT team would never think to check. 6 months of evidence that someone inside Hawkins Technology was accessing proprietary information and copying it to external drives. I traced the digital fingerprints as far as I could without raising red flags, but I'd hit a wall. Whoever was doing this knew how to cover their tracks. But now I had a photograph. Physical evidence that Sofia was meeting with Patrick Ling, the one person who stood to gain everything if our merger failed. The question was what to do with it. Tell Henry? The man who just told my sister he could barely stand to be in the same room with me? Tell my father? The man who'd spent 19 years wishing I was anything other than what I was? Or keep quiet, keep collecting evidence, and hope I could figure out what Sofia was planning before it was too late? My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Board meeting tomorrow at 9. Be presentable. No, good night. No, how's the trial period going? Just a reminder that I had a role to play, and playing it well was the only thing that mattered. The engagement announcement gala was exactly the kind of spectacle both our families loved. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, 500 guests in designer suits and gowns, all gathered to celebrate a marriage nobody had bothered to ask me if I wanted. I stood beside Henry for the photos, his hand resting stiffly on my lower back for exactly as long as the cameras flashed. And then he was gone, gravitating toward Sofia like she was the only real thing in the room. I'd made my decision 3 days ago. If I was stuck in this marriage, trapped by contracts and family expectations, then at least I could protect what mattered. I'd find out exactly what Sofia was doing and stop her before she destroyed both companies. It wasn't about Henry anymore. It was about not letting her win. I watched her work the room, all charm and grace, and when she slipped out onto the balcony with her phone pressed to her ear, I followed. The terrace was empty, and she'd moved to the far corner where the music from inside was just distant noise. I stayed in the shadows near the door, close enough to hear. The final data transfer happens the day after the merger completes. She was saying, her voice low and urgent. Once the contracts are signed and the companies integrate, Cooper's AI proprietary code will be worth billions to Ling. Yes, I'm sure. Henry doesn't suspect anything, and Riley's too pathetic to notice even if he tried. She laughed cold and sharp. 3 more months and we're done. Ling gets the code, I get my payout, and both families can deal with the fallout. My heart was hammering so hard I thought she might hear it. This wasn't just an affair. This was sabotage. Active, intentional destruction of everything both families had built. And she was using Henry's feelings for her to do it. I started to back away, but my shoe caught on the door frame. The sound was tiny, barely audible, but Sofia's head snapped around. She saw me. For one frozen second, we just stared at each other. Then she ended the call and walked toward me with that same perfect smile she used on everyone. Riley, she said sweetly, eavesdropping now? That's not very becoming. What are you doing? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Sofia, what are you selling to Ling? Her smile disappeared. You tell anyone what you just heard, and I'll make sure everyone knows about your little heat incident in college. Remember that? When you forgot your suppressants during finals and had to be escorted out of the library by security. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Henry already hates Omegas. Imagine what he'll do when he learns his future husband is that unstable, that out of control. You think he'll believe anything you say after that? You're sabotaging both our families, I said, but my voice shook. You can't. Riley. Henry's voice cut through the night air. He was standing in the doorway, his expression dark. What's going on? Sofia's face transformed instantly, eyes filling with tears. He cornered me out here, started accusing me of terrible things. I don't know what I did to make him hate me so much. That's not. I started, but Henry was already moving past me to her, his hand on her shoulder. Stay away from her, he said, his voice cold and final. I don't care what delusions you've created to make yourself feel better about this situation, but Sofia has nothing to do with your problems. You want out of this contract? Fine. I'll find a way to break it even if it costs me everything. But until then, stay away from her. He led Sofia back inside, leaving me alone on the balcony. My phone buzzed in my pocket. An email from an unknown address. No subject line, just a message and an attachment. You're not the only one who wants the truth. Trust no one. The attachment was a file folder. Inside were bank statements, communication logs, and meeting schedules, all showing a pattern of contact between Sofia and Titan Tech going back 18 months. Whoever sent this had been investigating far longer than I had, and they wanted me to know I wasn't alone. But I'd never felt more isolated in my life. The next 2 weeks were torture, but not for the reasons anyone would expect. I spent my nights hacking into communication logs, tracing Sofia's digital footprints through layers of encryption she thought were secure. I found more meetings with Ling, more evidence of data transfers, more proof that she was systematically selling out both families. But during the day, I had to pretend everything was normal. I had to live with Henry in the penthouse his father had insisted we share, watch him bring Sofia over like she belonged there, and endure the constant reminders that I was the unwanted obligation. The worst part wasn't the cruelty. It was that somewhere along the way, I'd made the mistake of falling in love with him. Not the version of Henry who sneered at Omega biology or made dismissive comments about suppressants being a crutch for weak-willed people. But Henry the first caught glimpses of when he thought no one was watching. The one who spent hours debugging code with a focus that bordered on obsession. The one who had his mother's bracelet repaired when the clasp broke instead of just buying a new one. The one who remembered how I took my coffee, even though he pretended not to notice anything about me. Loving someone who hated what you were felt like slow poison. But I couldn't seem to stop, and after that night of confronting Sofia, she began coming to the house more as if marking her territory, and along with her presence came unexplained incidents. My suppressants went missing from the locked cabinet in my bathroom. My heat tracking app was hacked, and the data was corrupted so I couldn't predict my cycle accurately. I came home one afternoon to find my bedroom door open, my files disturbed, though nothing was obviously taken. Someone was trying to destabilize me, and I had a pretty good idea who. But even as Sofia came around more, marking her territory with increasing aggression, something unexpected was happening. Henry's attitude toward me was shifting, and I didn't know what to make of it. Small gestures that shouldn't have mattered but did. When the elevator trapped us between floors for 40 minutes, he actually asked about my work. Really listened as I explained a security protocol, challenged my logic in ways that made me think harder. "That's actually clever," he said when we finally lurched free, and the surprise in his voice matched my own. Another night, I found him stuck on an AI problem and stopped to help despite knowing I shouldn't. I pointed out the recursive loop and watched him fix it in seconds. "How did you see that?" he asked, staring at the screen like he couldn't quite believe it. The next morning, my programming book reappeared on my desk with a bookmark where I'd left off. I tried not to read too much into it, tried to ignore the dangerous hope blooming in my chest. Maybe he was just being civil. Maybe I was imagining the way his hostility was softening into something that almost felt like tolerance. But I was in love with him, had been for longer than I wanted to admit, and even these small moments felt like oxygen after drowning. Then came the family dinner celebrating the merger negotiations. I'd taken my suppressants that morning like always, but halfway through the second course, something was wrong. My skin burned, my senses sharpened, every alpha sent overwhelming. I gripped my water glass and tried to breathe, but the heat was coming weeks early and unstoppable. Henry noticed first. His head turned toward me, nostrils flaring slightly, and I saw the exact moment his alpha instincts kicked in. His pupils dilated, his posture shifted, and then he was standing, his hand on my elbow. "Riley needs air," he announced to the table, his voice leaving no room for argument. He practically dragged me out of the dining room and into a private hallway before anyone could protest. "Why didn't you use your suppressants?" he said, his voice rough. He was standing too close enough that I could smell his scent overwhelming everything else, and my body responded in ways I desperately didn't want it to. "How long until your heat hits fully?" "I don't know," I managed, leaning against the wall because my legs felt unsteady. "A few hours, maybe." "Why would you help me? You hate what I am." Something complicated crossed his face. His hand was still on my arm, steadying me, and he didn't pull away. "I hate what Omegas represent," he said slowly, like he was working through the words even as he spoke them. "The expectation that biology determines everything. The assumptions people make." He paused, his gray eyes meeting mine. "That doesn't mean I'd let you suffer. Why do you even care?" The words came out more broken than I intended, and I hated how vulnerable I sounded. "I don't know," he admitted, and for the first time, he looked as confused as I felt. "But I do. And right now, we need to get you somewhere safe before this gets worse." He called his driver, got me back to the penthouse, and stayed until I locked myself in my room with enough suppressants to force the heat back down. It would make me sick later, I knew, but it was better than the alternative. When I finally emerged hours later, shaky and exhausted, there was a note slipped under my door. Henry's handwriting. I left food on the table and got you a new prescription. Take it and rest. I smiled at that. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Took me 3 days to trace the anonymous emails back to their source. The encryption was sophisticated, professional, the kind that told me whoever was helping me knew exactly what they were doing. When I finally cracked it, the IP address led me to a small consulting firm downtown. The name on the business registration made my breath catch. Oliver Mercer, Henry's father's former partner. The Omega Henry blamed for nearly destroying Cooper Industries. I met him in a cafe 2 blocks from Hawkins Technology. Somewhere public enough to feel safe but quiet enough to talk. Oliver was in his 4-ties, silver threading through his dark hair, and when he looked at me, I saw understanding in his eyes that made my chest tight. He'd been where I was, hated for what he couldn't change. "You're wondering why I'm helping you," Oliver said, sliding a folder across the table. "It's because I know what Sofia's doing. I've seen this pattern before, and I won't let another family be destroyed by corporate sabotage while everyone blames the Omega in the room. Henry thinks you tried to ruin his father's company," I said carefully. "I know what Henry thinks. He was 17 when I was forced out, old enough to remember but too young to understand what really happened." Oliver's expression went distant. His mother, Catherine, died during childbirth because she refused proper Omega medical care. The shame, the stigma around Omega pregnancy back then, it was worse than now. She thought if she just ignored her biology, pretended she was stronger than her body's needs, she could prove Omegas weren't weak. His voice cracked slightly. "She proved it by dying." I felt sick. Henry doesn't know that. His father couldn't bear to tell him the truth, that his mother's death wasn't inevitable, that it was society's hatred of Omegas that killed her. So when Gregory's grief started destroying the company, when he made decision after decision that would have bankrupted them, I tried to stop it. I pushed back, took control of accounts, blocked mergers that would have been disasters. Oliver met my eyes. The real saboteur used that against me, made it look like I was stealing, manipulating, using my Omega biology to control an alpha. I was framed and forced out, and Henry grew up believing I was everything wrong with Omegas. "But you've been tracking corporate espionage," I said, pieces falling into place. "For years. When I recognized Sofia's patterns, the same careful data theft, the same exploitation of family trust, I knew I had to help. Henry doesn't hate Omegas, Riley. He hates that he couldn't save his mother. He hates that his alpha instincts make him feel out of control. And he hates that the one person he's supposed to marry reminds him of everything he fears about himself." The folder Oliver gave me contained everything. Proof of Sofia's betrayal, her timeline, her plans. I sat in my car afterward, hands shaking, staring at the evidence. I could expose Sofia, save both companies, and protect everything our families had built. But it meant revealing I'd been investigating, admitting I'd been hacking systems and collecting evidence for months. Henry already barely tolerated me. What would he do when he learned I'd been lying about what I knew? The panic attack hit me at home, alone in my room, with the weight of impossible choices crushing my chest. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't figure out how to save everyone without destroying myself. I didn't hear my door open, didn't realize Henry was there until he was kneeling in front of me. "Breathe," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Riley, look at me. Just breathe." He didn't mock me, didn't leave. He just sat there on my bedroom floor while I fell apart. And when I could finally breathe again, he said something that broke me in a completely different way. "You're stronger than you pretend to be. I've noticed." His gray eyes were softer than I'd ever seen them. "Whatever's happening, whatever you're carrying alone, you don't have to." I wanted to tell him everything right then, wanted to trust that maybe he'd believe me. But the fear was too strong. So I just nodded and let myself pretend for one moment that he actually cared. Sofia had been watching me the entire time. I should have known she'd be monitoring my digital footprint, tracking every search, every encrypted file I accessed. She was too careful, too thorough to miss something like that. But I didn't realize how much she knew until the corporate event 3 days before the merger signing, when everything fell apart. It was supposed to be a simple celebration. Both families, key executives, and board members. I was standing near the refreshment table, trying to be invisible like always, when I smelled it. Sweet and cloying, artificial in a way that made my instincts scream danger. Aerosol pheromones. Concentrated, illegal, designed to trigger a heat response in seconds. I turned to run, but it was already too late. The heat slammed into me like a physical blow, and I heard someone gasp as my scent flooded the room. The humiliation was immediate and absolute. Every alpha in the room turned toward me, their instincts responding to the distress pheromones I couldn't control. I saw my father's horror, my stepmother's disgust, the board member's shock, and Sofia, standing in the corner with a champagne glass in her hand, watching with cold satisfaction. Then Henry was there, his hand on my arm, his body blocking me from view. "Move!" he snarled at someone who got too close, and the alpha command in his voice made them step back instantly. He got me out of there, into his car, back to the penthouse while I shook and burned and wanted to die from the shame of it. He stayed. Through the worst of the heat, when I was vulnerable and incoherent, he stayed. He didn't touch me beyond what was necessary to keep me safe. Didn't take advantage even though his alpha instincts must have been screaming at him. He just kept me hydrated, kept me cool, kept me from hurting myself in the delirium. And in the quiet moments between waves, when I could almost think clearly, everything spilled out. The investigation, Sofia's betrayal, the threats, Oliver's help, all of it. "You knew all this and didn't tell me?" Henry's voice was raw with something I couldn't identify. Horror, maybe, or betrayal. "You made it clear you didn't want anything from me except to suffer through this contract," I said, and my voice broke. "Why would you believe me over her? You love her. You hate me. You've made that obvious since the day we started living together." He didn't answer. He just looked at me like I'd shattered something, and I couldn't tell if it was anger or something else entirely, and left the room. When I woke up the next morning, he was gone. No note, no explanation, just an empty apartment and the devastating certainty that I'd lost whatever fragile thing had been building between us. I checked my phone and found messages from my father demanding explanations, from board members expressing concern, and from my stepmother saying we needed to discuss my embarrassing display. But nothing from Henry. Then I saw the security footage from the building's lobby. Henry leaving at dawn, getting into his car, and driving in the direction of Sofia's apartment. He'd gone to her. Despite everything I'd told him, despite the evidence, he'd chosen her anyway. Both families were in chaos. The merger was at risk, and I was being blamed for the scene, for the instability, for being exactly what everyone had always feared an Omega would be. Unreliable, controlled by biology, a liability. I pulled up the betrothal contract on my laptop and stared at the termination clause. If I broke it, my family would lose everything. The merger would collapse, Hawkins' technology would be vulnerable, and my father's legacy would crumble. But I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't force Henry into a marriage with someone he despised. I couldn't keep pretending that loving him wasn't destroying me. I signed the termination papers and sent them to both families' lawyers. Then I started packing, because there was nothing left for me here. I tried to save everyone, and all I'd done was prove that I was never strong enough for any of this in the first place. I was 3 suitcases deep into packing when I made the call to Oliver. My hands were still shaking from the heat, but if I was going down, I was taking Sofia with me. I wouldn't let her destroy both companies just because I was too broken to fight back anymore. "I'm going to the authorities," I told Oliver, my voice steadier than I expected. "I have enough evidence to prove what she's been doing. It'll expose my investigation, and my family will probably never forgive me for the scandal. But I can't let her win." Oliver was quiet for a moment. "That takes courage, Riley. More than most people have." Then softer, "For what it's worth, I think Henry knows that too." I didn't believe him. Henry had made his choice when he left, when he went to Sofia instead of staying to hear the rest of what I had to say. But it didn't matter anymore. I'd already signed the contract termination. Already accepted that loving someone who couldn't love me back was a punishment I'd finally stop inflicting on myself. I was sealing the evidence package for the corporate fraud division when I heard the penthouse door open. My whole body went rigid, expecting my father or maybe security coming to escort me out. But the footsteps were familiar, and when I looked up, Henry was standing in my bedroom doorway, looking like he hadn't slept at all. "You're packing," he said, and his voice was rough. "I terminated the contract this morning. The lawyers have the paperwork." I turned back to my suitcase, unable to look at him. "You're free. You can be with Sofia without any obligations hanging over you." I was wrong. The words stopped me cold. "About Omegas. About you. And I am sorry. I am not with Sofia anymore." I forced myself to face him. "You went to her. I saw the security footage." "I didn't go to her," Henry said, stepping into the room. "After what you told me, I needed to verify it. I accessed the files you'd collected, traced the communication logs, and found the financial transfers. All of it, Riley. The betrayal, the threats against you, the sabotaged suppressants. Everything you'd been carrying alone while I was too blind to see it. His jaw clenched. I've spent the last 12 hours working with the authorities and Oliver, building a case that will put Sofia and Ling in prison for corporate espionage and fraud. My breath caught. You contacted Oliver? He called me, said you were planning to go public with everything, even though it would destroy your reputation. Henry's gray eyes met mine, and there was something raw in them I'd never seen before. You were willing to sacrifice yourself to protect both our families. Even after everything I put you through. Why does it matter now? I asked, and I hated how my voice shook. You made it clear what you thought of me. You chose her every single time. I was wrong, he repeated, and he moved closer. My prejudice, my grief, my fear of losing control. It made you feel like you had to face all of this alone. And I can't take that back. But I can stand with you now if you'll let me. He paused. Let me protect you now. The way I should have from the beginning. I wanted to believe him so badly it physically hurt. Sofia's planning to sabotage the merger signing. She'll have contingencies, backup plans. Exposing her now will just make her accelerate. I know. That's why we let her think she's won. Henry pulled out his phone, showing me messages between him and Oliver and what looked like corporate attorneys. We let the merger ceremony proceed exactly as planned. And when she makes her move, we expose everything with evidence so irrefutable that she can't talk her way out of it. The authorities will be standing by. That's a risk, I said slowly. If something goes wrong, then we face it together. He looked at my packed suitcases, at the termination papers on my desk. I know I haven't given you any reason to trust me. I know I've done nothing but hurt you since this trial period started. But I'm asking you to trust me now. Work with me. Let me prove that I can be someone worth your faith. It was the vulnerability in his voice that broke through my defenses. The admission that he'd been wrong, that he understood what his hatred had cost. I thought about walking away, protecting myself, letting someone else deal with Sofia's destruction. But that wasn't who I was. I'd spent months investigating, collecting evidence, and preparing for this exact moment. And if Henry was finally willing to listen, to believe me, then maybe we actually had a chance to stop her. If we do this, you have to promise me something, I said quietly. No more leaving without explanation. No more assuming the worst about me. I promise, Henry said, and something in his expression made me think he actually meant it. We face this together. I nodded slowly, unpacking the decision along with my suitcases. Then let's take her down. The merger signing ceremony was held in the grand ballroom of the Carlson Hotel. Every detail perfect. Every guest positioned exactly where they needed to be. I stood beside Henry, playing the role of the dutiful Omega one last time. We hadn't spoken much in the 3 days since we'd made our plan, keeping our distance to sell the illusion that nothing had changed. Sofia watched us with barely concealed satisfaction, confident that her sabotage had worked, that the chaos she'd created had driven us further apart. Patrick Ling sat in the front row, his expression carefully neutral, but I caught him checking his phone twice, waiting for confirmation that the data transfer was ready, that Sofia had delivered what she'd promised. He had no idea that every communication between them had been logged, that the authorities were standing by just outside, that his entire empire was about to come crashing down. The ceremony proceeded exactly as planned. Speeches about partnership and innovation, about two families coming together for a stronger future. My father stood at the podium talking about legacy, and I felt Henry's hand brush against mine briefly, a reminder that I wasn't alone this time. Then it was time for the contract signing, and Henry stepped forward. Before we sign, I'd like to present a contract amendment, he said, his voice calm and authoritative. Something that's come to light in recent days that affects the terms of this merger. My father frowned. Gregory Cooper looked confused. But Sofia's face went pale, just for a second, before she recovered her composure. Henry nodded to his assistant, and the projection screen behind him lit up. Bank statements appeared first, showing transfers from Titan Tech to an account under Sofia's name. Then communication logs, messages between her and Ling discussing proprietary AI code, manufacturing specifications, and security protocols. Everything she'd stolen, everything she'd sold, lay out in irrefutable detail. For the past 18 months, Sofia Hawkins has been engaged in corporate espionage, Henry continued, and the room erupted in shocked whispers. She's been systematically stealing data from both Hawkins Technology and Cooper Industries, selling it to Patrick Ling of Titan Tech in exchange for substantial financial compensation. The next slide showed photographs. Sofia meeting with Ling in cafes, in parking garages, in hotel lobbies. She threatened my betrothed when he discovered what she was doing, Henry said, and his voice went hard. Sabotaged his suppressants, hacked his personal devices, and broke into his room to monitor his investigation. And 3 days ago, she deliberately triggered his heat in public using illegal aerosol pheromones to humiliate both our families and create chaos that would allow her to complete her data transfer during the merger finalization. The final slide was security footage. Sofia was entering my bedroom when I wasn't home, searching through my desk, photographing documents with her phone. The timestamp was clear, undeniable. Sofia stood abruptly, her face flushed. He's lying. This is fabricated. Henry hates Omegas. Everyone knows he'd do anything to get out of this marriage. And now he's using these ridiculous accusations to manipulate everyone. Her voice was shrill, desperate. Riley seduced him during his heat. This is Omega manipulation at its finest, and you're all falling for it. The only thing I'm falling for is the truth I should have seen months ago. Henry cut her off, his voice steel. You're right that I hated what Riley represented. But he's the one who put everything on the line to save both our families while asking for nothing in return. He investigated you for months, collected evidence, protected everyone, and he did it alone because my prejudice made him think no one would believe him. The only manipulation here is yours, Sofia. I'd like to add my testimony to the record. Oliver's voice came from the back of the room. He walked forward, and I saw Henry's jaw clench briefly before he nodded with what looked like respect. 20 years ago, I was framed for the same kind of corporate sabotage that Sofia committed. I've spent 2 decades tracking these patterns, and when I recognized what she was doing, I helped Riley gather the evidence you're seeing now. My name is being cleared today as part of this investigation, and I want everyone in this room to know that Riley Hawkins is the reason both these companies are still standing. The authorities entered then, moving towards Sofia and Ling with quiet efficiency. Sofia tried to run, actually tried to push past security, screaming about betrayal and lies, but it was over. They took her out in handcuffs while Ling went silently, his lawyer already on the phone. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Board members demanding explanations, executives trying to understand what had just happened. Both families in complete shock. My father approached me slowly, and for the first time in my life, I saw something like respect in his eyes. You saved us, he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion I'd never heard from him. You saved everything, and I never even knew you were fighting. I'm sorry, Riley, for not seeing you, for not valuing what you were capable of. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say to that. 23 years of being invisible, and now he saw me. It should have felt like victory, but mostly it just hurt. I nodded because words wouldn't come. Gregory Cooper was talking to Henry, and then to Oliver, his hand on Oliver's shoulder in what looked like an apology decades overdue. I watched years of misunderstandings start to crack, and hoped they could find their way back to each other. Then Gregory addressed the room, his voice carrying over the chaos. Given Sofia's interference with the merger terms and the corporate espionage that's come to light, the betrothal contract between our families is void. Both Riley and Henry are free to walk away from this arrangement with no penalties to either family. The merger will proceed on its own merits, as it should have from the beginning. Everyone turned to look at us. The merger had survived without needing our marriage to seal it, and we were finally free. Henry turned to me, and in front of everyone he said, "The contract might be void, but I'd like to make a new one. One where Riley actually has a choice." Vulnerability flickered in his eyes. "I can't promise I won't mess this up. I have years of wrong thinking to unlearn. But if you're willing to let me try, not because of our families or a contract, but because somewhere in this disaster I started falling for the person brave enough to save everyone but himself, I'm asking you to choose me back." The ballroom went silent. Every eye was on us. Something broke open in my chest. All the pain and loneliness and desperate love I'd been carrying alone. My hands shook as I forced myself to breathe. "I've been in love with you this whole time," I said, my voice cracking. "Since before we started living together. I've been in love with you, and it nearly destroyed me." He flinched, but I couldn't stop. Every cruel word. Every time you brought Sofia into our home and made it clear I was nothing but an obligation. It broke something in me. When I woke up after my heat and you were gone, I thought I'd lost everything. "Riley," he started. But I shook my head. So yes, I choose you. But I need you to prove you won't leave again when things get hard. I need you to show me this is real, that you actually want me and not just the idea of fixing your mistakes. My voice dropped, because I can't survive loving you and losing you again. Henry stepped closer, close enough that everyone else disappeared. Then let me prove it, he said quietly. Every day for as long as it takes. Let me earn your trust back. His hand reached for mine, hesitant, asking permission. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. I looked at our hands, his hovering just above mine. I thought about the contract that had bound us, the hatred that had separated us, the truth that had finally set us free. I thought about the person I'd been, invisible and afraid, and the person I was now, strong enough to demand what I deserved. I took his hand, and the room exhaled. Don't make me regret this, I whispered. I won't, he promised, and I desperately wanted to believe him. 3 months later, I stood in my new office at Hawkins Technology, watching the city lights flicker to life. Director of Security and Innovation. I'd earned it. My father had personally announced my promotion at the last board meeting, acknowledging that my investigation had saved both companies. My phone buzzed. Henry. Dinner at 7? I'm cooking. I smiled, remembering his first attempt that nearly set off the smoke alarm. The effort meant more than the food ever could. The past 3 months had been a revelation. Henry had dismantled the discriminatory hiring practices at Cooper Industries, implemented sensitivity training, and publicly apologized. He was in therapy twice a week, processing the grief he'd buried for so long. Oliver had become a regular presence, helping Henry understand Omega experiences without shame. We were dating properly now. Coffee shops where Henry actually listened to my ideas. Long walks where our hands found each other naturally. Art galleries where he'd stand behind me, chin resting on my shoulder. He courted me with thoughtful gestures, books appearing on my desk, playlists of songs I'd mentioned once. Public acknowledgement that he was proud to be with me, that being Omega was just one part of who I was. We'd moved into a brownstone we'd chosen together, smaller and cozier, filled with books and plants. When I got home, Henry was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, the scent of garlic and herbs filling the air. His smile made my heart flutter. How was your day? He asked, pulling me close for a kiss that tasted like wine. Long but good. I leaned into him, feeling safe in a way I'd never expected. After dinner, we ended up on the couch, his fingers running through my hair. That's when he reached for the bracelet on the side table. His mother's bracelet, the one he never took off. I want you to have this, Henry said quietly. Henry, I can't. She would have loved how brave you are, he said, voice thick with emotion. My whole life, I thought she died because being Omega made her weak. But Oliver told me the truth. She died because society made her ashamed of needing help. She was brave, fighting stigma even when it cost her everything. He fastened the bracelet around my wrist. You fight that same fight every day. She would have been proud to know you. And I'm proud to love you. I kissed him, trying to pour everything I felt into it. When we pulled apart, I whispered the fear that still haunted me. I'm still afraid you'll wake up one day and regret choosing me. Henry's hands cupped my face, his gray eyes intense. Riley, loving you isn't work. Learning to be better, that's work I should have done years ago. But loving you? That's the easiest thing I've ever done. You're brilliant and brave. And every day with you feels like a gift. He pulled back slightly, nervous, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. My heart stopped. I know it's only been 3 months, Henry said, opening it to reveal a simple silver band. But I don't want there to be any doubt about what I want our future to be. He took a shaky breath. Marry me because you want to, not because of a contract or obligation. Marry me because I love you, because you're the smartest, bravest person I know. And being in Omega has nothing to do with why I can't imagine my life without you. Tears streamed down my face. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything, Henry said. Yes? I laughed through my tears. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto my finger, and then we were kissing again, desperate and sweet and full of promise. Later, wrapped in each other's arms, I thought about how far we'd come. From a contract signed before we were born to a choice made freely. From hatred to love earned through honesty and growth. The merger happened 6 weeks later on new terms. Sofia and Ling faced federal charges for corporate espionage. Oliver accepted a consulting position at Cooper Industries, his name finally cleared. My father and I had dinner once a week now, building something real. And Henry kept his promises, every single one. I looked at the ring on my finger, at the bracelet on my wrist, at the man sleeping peacefully beside me. I was exactly where I was meant to be. Not because a contract said so, but because my heart did. And that made all the difference. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, tell us your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, keep daydreaming in BL.